Hello everyone. Tonight's story is about a lonely father, a stubborn little girl, and the wounded orc woman who collapsed at their door during a winter storm. Because sometimes the stranger we save out of mercy becomes the person who quietly teaches a broken house how to feel like home again.
Davin Rel had learned to trust winter only when it was already over. The sky could sit pale all morning, harmless as wool, then turn iron by noon and throw half the north against his roof before supper. That was why he had spent 2 days stacking wood under the lean-to, bracing shutters, and checking the covered walkway between house and barn for loose boards. He had built the walkway after Sora died, though he told himself it was simple sense. A child should not have to cross an iced yard to fetch eggs. Practical men built things. They did not stand in doorways remembering who was not there to carry the lantern. The farm sat where human settlement road and old orc clan roots crossed at uneasy angles. Stone foundation, timber walls, barn joined to the house by Davin's walkway, smokehouse beyond, chicken coop close enough that foxes considered it an invitation. He had chosen the place because it was too far from town for neighbors to stop by without reason, and close enough that he could sell what he grew. Solitude was easier when a man called it planning. Lena sat on the bottom step with a strip of cloth between her knees, trying to make a scarf for a wooden horse, whose head Davin had repaired twice, and whose left front leg had been replaced with a whittled peg. She was 7, narrow as a reed under 3 layers of wool, with Sora's dark hair and Davin's grave mouth when she concentrated. Every few minutes she looked up at the sky through the open door while Davin split the last of the crooked pine rounds on the block outside. The wind had begun coming in from the east, sharp and wet. It carried the smell of snow before snow itself, and the horses in the barn had gone quiet in the way animals did when they knew more than people. "Papa," Lena said, "the clouds are low." "I see them. Low clouds mean the storm is close. They mean you should finish that scarf indoors. It is not for me. The horse can be cold indoors." Lena considered this with the seriousness she gave all flawed adult logic. Horses live outside. Wooden ones don't. She tied a knot that looked like a trapped spider and held it up. Sora would have made it better. Davin's axe came down through the pine. The split opened clean, pale heartwood showing. He set both halves aside before answering. "Your mother made most things better." Lena watched him long enough that he looked away first. She had a way of doing that. It was not accusation. He could have managed accusation. It was patience, which was worse. The wind pushed snow across the yard in thin grains that whispered over the packed earth, and Davin reached for another round before deciding there was no sense in pretending he did not hear the storm arriving. He stacked the split wood under the lean-to, lowered the bar across the outer shutter, and took the axe inside. Lena carried the wooden horse as if it might object to the weather. By the time they had brought in the lamp oil and set extra blankets near the hearth, the snow was falling sideways. It struck the windows like thrown sand. The house groaned once, not from weakness but from old timber accepting the evening's argument. Davin latched the door and stood with his hand on the iron slide, listening. Border winters had more than one voice. Snow had a voice. Wind had one. Branches had another. Men trying to approach quietly had a fourth, and he had not forgotten it just because he no longer wore a guard's badge. Lena was kneeling by the hearth, feeding kindling into the flame, when she lifted her head. "Papa." He looked at her. "There's someone outside." He almost said no, not because he doubted her ears exactly, but because the shape of his life depended on certain refusals being possible. Then something struck the door. Not a knock, a weight. The latch shuddered under his hand. Davin moved Lena behind him without speaking, took the skinning knife from the shelf beside the door, and lifted the bar. The wind shouldered into the room. Snow came with it. On the threshold, half fallen against the frame, was an orc woman. She was large enough that the doorway made her seem larger, shoulders filling the storm, skin a deep winter green gone grey around the mouth, black hair frozen in ropes against her jaw. One tusk was chipped near the point. Her coat was travel leather lined with fur, cut for movement rather than display, and the right side of it was soaked so dark that even in firelight Davin knew blood before he smelled it. She had one hand braced against the jamb and the other clamped to her ribs. Her eyes were open. Gold, unfocused, furious at the inconvenience of her body failing in front of strangers. Davin's first thought was distance to weapon. Hers, not his. Her belt knife was missing. Her pack hung from one shoulder, strap cut halfway through. Could she stand? Could she strike? How much blood had she lost? Was anyone following? The questions came in the clean order training gave a man, when feeling, would only slow him down. She needs to come in, Lena said from behind him. No. Papa. We don't take in strays. The Orc woman's mouth moved. It might have been an insult. It might have been an attempt to say she wasn't a stray. The wind took it. Lena stepped around Davin just far enough to look up at him. Snow touched her eyelashes and melted. She did not plead. She did not need to. She stood in the open doorway in her stocking feet, shivering, and looked at him as if he had asked her to accept that a door was only for keeping weather out, and not for deciding who was allowed to live through the night. Davin swore under his breath, put the knife aside, and caught the Orc woman when her knees gave. Quick note before we continue. If you want hotter and uncensored GL stories, I'll be sharing them on my Patreon page. These are the scenes I can't post here, so check the description for details. Getting Mira Volkash into the house required more negotiation with gravity than with the woman herself. She did not collapse so much as object downward. Davin took most of her weight under one arm, felt the hard heat of fever through her coat, and half dragged, half carried her across the threshold while Lena shoved the door closed with both hands. The Orc made a sound when he lowered her onto the settle near the hearth. It was not a groan. It was the sound of someone marking a fact she disapproved of. Knife, she said. Davin looked at her belt. Gone? Her common was roughened by cold but clear. Bandits took it badly. Lena, still by the door, whispered, Badly for them. The Orc's gaze shifted to her. For a moment the hard line of her face changed by less than a finger's width. Yes. Davin cut the coat open at the side. Hold still. I am holding still. You are trying to sit up. That is different. It is not. It is to me. The wound was deep, angled under the ribs, ugly with clotted blood and melted snow. A narrow blade. Not clean, but not wide enough to have opened the belly. He had seen worse in border skirmishes. He had buried men from less. Davin washed his hands in boiled water, laid out linen, needle, spirits, honey salve, and the old field kit he kept wrapped in oilcloth beneath the flour bin. He had not opened it in 3 years. His fingers remembered the buckles before his mind did. The Orc watched him with sharp irritation. Not that cloth, the boiled one. I know. Spirits after water. Not before. I know. If you sew too tight, it tears when I breathe. I know. Her eyes narrowed. You have done this. Yes. Good. She shut her mouth, then opened it again. There is comfrey in my pack, wrapped in blue. Davin looked at the pack, which had fallen near the door and left blood on the floorboards. Lena was already moving. No. Davin said. She froze. He took the pack himself, because there were limits even to the useful boldness of children, and found the blue-wrapped bundle tucked beside dried mushrooms, cord, a flint roll, and a small slate marked with lines he did not recognize. He brought the comfrey to the table. The Orc woman gave him instructions for preparing it, not because she thought him stupid, he realized, but because she trusted correct work more than pride. This should have annoyed him less than it did. Lena watched from the doorway to the sleeping alcove, with both fists pressed under her chin. Davin wanted to send her upstairs. He also knew that she would go only in body, and keep the rest of herself at the crack of the door, where fear could make worse pictures than truth. So he let her watch as he cleaned the wound, let her see blood as something handled, not something whispered around. Mira's hands gripped the edge of the settle hard enough to pale her knuckles. Once, when the needle went through, she spoke an orc word, low and sharp. "What does that mean?" Lena asked. "It means your father has cold hands," Mira said. Davin tied the stitch. "It does not mean that." "No. Then don't tell her it does." The orc woman showed her teeth. It took him half a breath to understand that it was almost a smile. "It means worse." Lena nodded, satisfied with this adult honesty, and stayed quiet until the wound was dressed, and Mira had swallowed willowbark tea with a grimace that suggested she considered pain more tolerable than the taste of medicine. Davin helped her onto the narrow bed in the alcove he used when sickness came to the house, because it was closest to the fire and easiest to watch. She objected to being helped. He ignored the objection. She objected more clearly. He ignored that too. "If you tear the stitches," he said, "I will sew them again badly out of spite." "You would not." "No." "Then do not make empty threats." Lena looked from one to the other with interest. "Papa does that when he's worried." Davin turned. "Go upstairs." "But I have not asked my question." "You can ask it from the stairs." This was part of the day no matter what else happened. Sora had started it when Lena was small enough to ask why spoons were not forks and whether birds knew they were lucky. The last question of every day, spoken aloud before sleep, so no worry had to be carried alone into darkness. Davin had continued because stopping would have been another death in the house. He had never explained it. Lena had never asked him to. She climbed 3 steps and turned back, hair loose from its ribbon. "If someone says they are not a stray, can they still be one?" Davin looked at the orc woman. Her eyes were closed, but not enough. "Sleep," he said. "That is not an answer. It is the one available." Lena sighed with all the disappointment of a magistrate and went upstairs. Mira opened one eye. "She is difficult. She is 7. That does not answer me either." Despite himself, Davin almost laughed. It was no more than air through his nose, but in that house it sounded loud. He banked the fire, set a chair near the hearth, and sat with the field knife across his knees, out of habit more than intent. The storm pressed its whole body against the roof. In the alcove, the orc woman's breathing settled into the uneven rhythm of fevered sleep. Above him, Lena's bed creaked once, then stilled. He should have been thinking about danger. He did for a while. Bandits 3 miles out meant roads unsafe. An injured orc on human land meant questions if anyone found out. Blood on his floor meant work in the morning. But after a time, his mind moved, without permission, to the way Lena had looked at him in the doorway, and to the familiar shape of his own surrender. A dog with a torn ear, a goat that had wandered in lame, a merchant who claimed he needed a corner of barn until dawn and stayed 3 days because the rain did not respect Davin's preferences. "We don't take in strays," he had said each time, and each time the house had made room. The orc woman muttered in her sleep. Not common. The words had weight and corners. Davin did not understand them, which made it easier not to answer. He rose to check the bandage near midnight, then again when the fire sank low, then again because stillness had become impossible. Her fever climbed before dawn and broke as grey light seeped through the shutters. He was standing over the wash basin, scrubbing dried blood from under his nails, when he realized he had not slept. It did not surprise him. Sleep was another thing that came more easily to people who had not opened their door. The storm kept them for 4 days. On the first, Mira woke before noon and tried to stand. Davin caught her by the shoulder and pushed her back with less gentleness than a healer might have used, and more than a guard would have. "No," he said. Her eyes focused on him. In daylight they were less gold than amber, with a dark ring around the iris. "I need to know where I am. On a bed. That is not enough information. It is the information you need until you can cross the room without bleeding on it." She looked down at the bandage, then at the floorboards where he had scrubbed but not fully erased the stain. "I bled on your house." "Yes, I will clean it. You will lie down. I did not ask permission. Neither did the stitches. Lena, who had been sitting cross-legged near the hearth with her slate, made a small sound into her sleeve. Mira turned her head. You find this funny? A little. Good. Pain should be useful. That was how the first day went. Mira gave her name after Davin asked for it the third time, as if the first 2 attempts had been part of a test neither of them had agreed to. Mira Volkash. Tracker. Herbalist. Pathfinder for caravans when caravans paid and weather did not forbid scents. She had been 3 miles east, cutting through the pine hollow to avoid the old washout, when 3 men decided her pack looked worth more than their lives. She said this while inspecting the stitching in her side with professional criticism. You killed them? Davin asked because Lena was in the room, and because he needed the answer shaped carefully. 2. The third ran after cutting me. I found him later. Lena's chalk stopped. Mira looked at the child, then adjusted the truth without breaking it. He will not trouble your road. Davin watched Lena absorb this. Children in border country learned early that safety did not arrive clean, but he had hoped to delay some knowledge simply by refusing it entry. That had not worked. Very few of his refusals did. By the second day, Mira could sit upright for meals and criticize Davin's cooking with the calm of a person reporting weather. He made barley porridge with dried apple because it filled a bowl and offended no one, except, apparently, people who knew what salt and onions were for. From the alcove, she instructed him through a stew while refusing to call it cooking. Lena declared the result better than anything her father had ever placed near a spoon. Your father cooks as if food has insulted him. Mira said. He boils things until they apologize. Lena replied. It is efficient. Davin said, and both of them looked unconvinced. That night, Lena came down in her blanket for the last question of the day, a habit Sora had begun, and Davin had continued, because stopping it would have left another empty place in the house. She asked whether orcs had last questions. Mira, sharpening a bone needle with a small stone from her pack, said most clans asked first questions at dawn. Where the trail was, who walked it, what had to be carried. Lena decided those were work questions, and asked Mira for one proper night question. Mira looked at the fire for a long moment and said, Why did the snow wait until I was 3 miles from shelter? Lena told her snow was rude. Mira agreed so gravely that Davin had to look down at the harness strap in his hands. On the 3rd day, he found Mira standing at the hearth, with one hand pressed to her bandage and the other lifting the kettle. She wore his old shirt belted over her leggings, too short in the sleeves and tight across the shoulders, and she looked like someone the world had failed to make useless. Put that down, he said. I am making tea. You are tearing stitches. I checked them. I did not. Do you require ownership of every wound in your house? He took the kettle from her. Their fingers touched on the handle, barely, enough for him to notice the heat of her skin and the rough pad of her thumb. Lena from the table said, Papa fixes things when he doesn't know what to say. Mira glanced toward the covered walkway visible through the window and said nothing at all, which was worse than speaking. When the storm broke, it did so all at once. On the 5th morning the sky opened pale and high, the wind fell away, and the whole farm glittered as if every hard edge had been forgiven. Davin shoveled the yard, cleared the coop door, and checked the road. There were no fresh tracks beyond those of fox and hare. By noon, Mira stood without swaying. By evening she had repacked her belongings with precise motions, each bundle returned to its place. Davin watched from the table, while pretending to repair the latch from the flower chest. Lena watched openly. She had no patience for pretending. You are leaving? She asked. Mira tied the pack closed. I can walk. That is not what I asked. No. Davin looked up. Mira stood near the hearth, one hand resting against her side, not from weakness now, but awareness. I owe you, she said. I will stay until the debt is settled. Tell me what settles it. Davin set the latch down. There is no debt. Mira's expression did not change, which told him he had said something foolish. You took me in. You treated the wound. You fed me under your roof while the storm held. There is debt. I would have done it for anyone bleeding on my doorstep. No? No? You would have considered it for anyone. You did it for me. Lena looked between them as if watching a game whose rules were better than the slate lessons Davin made her do. I don't want anything, he said. Mira's brow lowered. Want is not the measure. It is here. Then your here is badly built. Davin almost smiled, then remembered he was irritated. You can't stay because of a debt I don't recognize. I can. You need work, roads, caravans. The roads are poor. Caravans wait until thaw. Your west fence leans. The coop roof leaks at the back corner. Your horse has a stone bruise beginning in the left forehoof. The chimney draws badly when the wind turns north. The child needs boots before the melt. Lena looked down at her boots, offended on their behalf. Davin stared. You inventoried my farm while fevered? No, after. After being told to rest? I rested between observations. He leaned back. The chair creaked. And if I say none of that settles anything? Then I continue until you can name what does. Lena's mouth curved around triumph and tried to hide it. Davin saw it and knew the argument had been lost before he entered it. This was the trouble with a house. Once someone had been warmed by its fire, the walls remembered their shape around them. Fine, he said. The fence first, when you can lift a rail without opening yourself. Mira nodded once. Good. It doesn't mean you're staying. No, she said. It means the fence is first. The fence came first. Davin refused to let Mira lift the heaviest rails, and Mira treated this as an insult to both her strength and the dignity of lumber. They settled into a compromise neither respected. She measured, braced, shaved pegs, and held posts steady while he hammered them into frozen earth. Lena followed with a basket of nails and the expression of a child appointed to high office. While they worked, Mira said she had been born northwest past the river bend, on Volcash winter ground. Then she added, It is not Volcash now. A treaty had made new lines, then tolls, then permits, then a clerk's word for taking what a clan had used longer than paper had existed. Davin should have asked where her people had gone. He did not. He drove another peg through the rail, and the fence straightened between them. She began working into the farm the way frost worked into stone, not loudly, not quickly, but with a persistence that changed the shape of things before Davin could decide whether to object. The carp roof stopped leaking. The chimney drew clean after she climbed onto the roof at dawn with a rope around her waist and a bundle of wire brush Davin had not known she had made. She reset the loose hinge on the pantry door because, she said, a door that sagged invited mice. She sorted his dried herbs with an expression of contained disbelief and threw away a bundle of mouldy yarrow he had been meaning to inspect since autumn. She cooked with onions, winter roots, dried meat, and handfuls of bitter leaves that became, under her knife and patience, meals Lena discussed as if reporting miracles. Papa, Lena said over stew one evening, Mira made carrots taste like they wanted to be eaten. Davin looked into his bowl. Carrots have always been food, not when you make them. Mira ate in silence, but the corner of her mouth shifted. You could defend me, Davin told her. I could. Lena smiled into her spoon. At night, Mira sat at the far end of the table under the low lamp and marked lines on her slate. Not letters Davin knew. Orc script moved differently from common, all hooked angles and shortcuts like tracks left by birds. Lena became fascinated. On the 9th night, she slid from her chair and stood beside Mira until Mira looked up. Is that words? Yes. Teach me one. Davin expected refusal. Adults refused children by reflex. Not unkindly, but because teaching took time and children spilled time everywhere. Mira drew one mark on Lena's slate. Va. What does it mean? Path, also choice, also the space between two trees when you decide to pass through. That is too many meanings. Then use it carefully. Lena practiced until the slate was full of crooked marks. Davin mended a basket handle across the table and tried not to watch Mira watching his daughter. The orc woman did not smile the way human women did when children pleased them. She became more precise. She placed Lena's fingers correctly on the chalk, turned the slate a little to match the angle of her wrist, and said good only when the word had earned it. Lena glowed under the sparseness. Davin understood that. Praise given rarely had weight. The last question that night came from the second step, as usual. If Va means path and choice and trees, how do orcs know which one someone means? Mira was rapping her slate. By what comes before and after? Lena nodded slowly. Like people. Mira's hand stilled on the cord. Yes. Davin looked down at the basket and found he had woven the handle too tight. The matter of the debt did not shrink. It grew legs. Every task Mira completed became, in her mind, a stone set on one side of a scale. In Davin's mind, it became a reason she might feel free to leave, which made him find fault with the scale itself. He told her the fence was just a fence. She told him fences kept children from chasing goats into gullies. He told her the chimney was maintenance. She told him breathing smoke all winter was not a tradition worth protecting. He told her the boots she made for Lena from softened hide and old wool were too much. She told him bad boots made bad walking, and bad walking made slow running, and slow running had killed more people than winter ever had. You cannot count every useful thing as debt payment, he said one morning while she adjusted the strap of Lena's new boot. I can. Then you'll be done by spring. Mira tugged the knot tight. Will I? He did not answer quickly enough. Lena looked at him. Mira looked at the knot. The room held the silence like a bowl filled too near the rim. There are chickens missing, Davin said. Mira released the boot. I know. Of course you know. The tracks are under the east fence. I was going to set a trap. Killing trap. Fox has to learn. Dead things learn poorly. It will come back. Yes. That is the problem. No, the problem is that your coop is easy. He crossed his arms. You have an answer for everything. No, only for foxes. The fox was northern, long-bodied, and pale as dirty snow, with black feet and the lean patience of hunger. Mira found its tracks where they dipped under the east fence, circled the coop, and vanished toward the pine hollow. For 3 days she followed sign at dawn and dusk, not with a hunter's excitement, but with a worker's attention. Lena begged to come. Davin said no the first 2 times, and yes the third, because Mira said, she will learn better beside me than imagining behind glass. Davin came as well, because there were many ways to say he trusted someone, and very few he was prepared to use. The woods held winter differently than the fields. Snow lay deeper under the pines, blue in shadow, marked by the delicate writing of small animals. Mira moved through it without breaking branches. Davin, who had once tracked smugglers through sleet, felt loud beside her. Lena stepped in Mira's footprints with her tongue caught between her teeth. The orc woman pointed out where the fox had paused to listen, where it had leapt a fallen branch, where a hare had changed direction too late. She did not soften the lesson. She did not make it cruel. They found the den under the roots of a wind-thrown spruce, not close enough to threaten the farm if the coop were repaired properly, close enough for a starving animal to take opportunity. Mira crouched, studied the entrance, then set a live snare with scraps of dried fish and a loop that would hold without choking. Davin watched her hands. Large hands, scarred, capable of force, and careful with a loop of cord because care was what the work required. When they caught the fox the next morning, Lena cried because the animal screamed, and because it was beautiful, and because those 2 facts were impossible for a child to reconcile quickly. Mira covered the fox's head with her cloak, murmured something in Orcish, and worked the loop loose while Davin held the body through the cloth. The fox shook with terror. Its ribs moved fast under his palms. He felt every bone. They carried it in a crate 3 miles north, beyond the creek and the old stone marker where human survey paint had flaked from a rock older than either claim. Mira opened the crate facing the deeper woods. The fox exploded out, vanished, then appeared once between 2 pines, narrow face turned back. Davin said, "Why not kill it?" Mira wiped blood from a scratch on her wrist. It was hungry, not cruel. The pause after that was long enough for Lena to stop crying. Davin looked at the place where the fox had disappeared. Snow began to fall from a branch in soft clumps. He thought of bandits on the road. He thought of men at treaty tables. He thought of every creature that crossed a line it could not see and was punished for wanting to live. Then he picked up the empty crate. "Coop needs reinforcing," he said. "Yes," Mira answered. He waited for her to add that she had already said so. She did not. Somehow the restraint annoyed him more. As weeks gathered, the house changed in ways too small to accuse. A second pair of boots dried by the hearth. The pantry smelled of smoke, sage, and the sharp root Mira used against winter cough. Lena's slate held common letters on one side and orc marks on the other. Davin found a carved peg beside the door where Mira had hung her cloak because the old hook sat too low for her. She had made the peg from ashwood, fitted it between beams without splitting them, and said nothing about it. He noticed after supper, and stood looking at it long enough that Lena asked whether the wall had done something wrong. Mira did not take Sora's place. That would have been too simple and too false. Sora remained in the blue cup with a chip near the handle that no one used and no one moved, in the folded shawl at the bottom of the chest, in the way Lena's hair curled damp at the temples after washing. Mira occupied different spaces. The yard at dawn, the table end under the lamp, the barn threshold with a goat's hoof in one hand and a knife in the other, trimming rot with calm efficiency. The place beside Lena when the child asked why some people made maps over other people's paths. Mira had answered, because ink is cheaper than blood for the person holding the pen. And Davin had dropped the harness buckle he was polishing. He began to look for work beyond what was needed. A loose stair, a shelf that could be stronger, a gate latch that stuck only if a man wanted an excuse to stand in the cold and think. His hands had always moved. Now they moved because stillness brought Mira into focus. Mira lifting the water bucket as if weight were a conversation she had already won. Mira listening to Lena's last question with the gravity of a council elder. Mira at the table after the child slept, the hard competence gone quiet around her eyes while she rubbed oil into the cracked leather of her pack straps. There was a private expression she wore then, one Davin recognized without wanting to. It belonged to people who had put down nothing long enough for it to become theirs. One night, Davin found Mira in the barn speaking low Orcish to the mayor, who leaned into the sound despite mistrusting most people on principle. Mira said it was not a song, but a counting. Steps between camps, names of rivers, places to water horses, things that should not be forgotten. He almost asked whether those places could still be reached. Instead, he asked about the mayor's hoof. Mira looked at him and said, "You do not ask questions you want answered." He had no clean denial ready. Later, in the house, Sora's name entered conversation by smaller doors. Lena mentioned pears. Davin said her mother had liked the hard yellow ones from Miller's orchard. Mira washed the blue cup with the chip in its handle and set it where sunlight reached it. Davin stood ready to be angry and found only the fact of a cup no longer hidden in shadow. The thaw came unevenly. Days softened, nights froze, and the yard became a map of mud, ice, and places where Lena was forbidden to step and stepped anyway. Trade resumed in cautious pieces. A peddler came by with needles, salt, and news from the settlement. A border authority official had been seen at farms west of the creek, asking after unregistered orc movement. The peddler told this while accepting hot tea and not looking directly at Mira. which Davin noticed and disliked. Mira noticed and seemed bored by it, which he disliked more. Officials count what they do not understand, she said after the peddler left. They fine what they can count. Davin answered. Am I fineable? Probably. Lena looked up from sorting buttons. Can people be fined? People can be fined for people. Davin said. That is stupid. Yes. Mira tied a bundle of dried nettle. I can leave before he comes. The room changed. Not dramatically. The fire did not gutter. The roof did not crack. Lena's hand stopped in the button bowl, and Davin's knife paused halfway through, trimming a candle wick. Small changes. Enough. No, Lena said. Mira looked at her. No, thank you, Lena added, because manners mattered even when adults were being foolish. Davin set the candle down. Weather's bad north. It is bad here. Roads are watched. I know unwatched roads. Your side is not fully healed. It is healed enough. Enough for what? Running from a clerk? Mira's eyes sharpened. From causing trouble in a house that opened to me. Davin stood because sitting felt like losing ground. This house opens where I say it opens. The moment after he spoke, he understood what he had said. So did Mira. So did Lena, whose eyes went round and then carefully downward, as if staring at her buttons could make her invisible and present at the same time. Mira's voice lowered. That sounds like a claim. It is a statement. Statements become claims when officials write them down. Then let him write. She studied him. You do not know what that means. I know enough. No, you know fines. You know suspicion. You know men with clean gloves asking why an orc sleeps under your roof. You do not know how humans make a cage out of a word and call it record-keeping. Davin took that because it was true, and because truth delivered without softness still deserved a place to land. Then tell me what word doesn't make a cage. Mira had no answer ready. That unsettled her more than argument. She looked at the dried nettle in her hand, tied the bundle too tight, untied it, and began again. The official arrived 2 days later in a blue-grey coat with brass buttons, polished bright enough to declare their own importance. His name was Pell, according to the leather folio he carried, and he rode a clean-footed horse that disliked the farm mud as much as its rider did. Davin saw him from the barn and had time to tell Lena to stay inside. He did not tell Mira to hide. He thought about it. Then he did not. Pell dismounted at the yard gate and looked first at the farmhouse, then the barn. Then Mira, who stood by the chopping block with an armful of split wood, as if border officials grew from Thor mud every spring and were best handled after stacking fuel. Master Rel, Pell said, formerly of the Southmark Guard. Davin is fine. Pell smiled in a way that suggested nothing was fine unless stamped. I am conducting a settlement presence review. We have reports of orc travellers wintering outside designated trade quarters. Travellers travel. And wintering? Winter interferes. Pell's gaze shifted to Mira. Name and clan. Mira set the wood down neatly. Mira Volkash. Purpose on this property? Davin answered before she could. She works here. Pell's pen moved. Seasonal hire. Farmhand. Mira turned her head slightly. Davin did not look at her. Registered? Pell asked. No. Then she cannot be employed in settlement bounds without notice filed. Then file notice. Pell blinked, displeased by simplicity. There are fees. I assumed. Inspections. The barn is there. Character attestations. Davin let the silence sit until Pell looked up from his folio. Write this down. Davin said. Mira Volkash came to my door wounded in a storm. I took her in. She has remained on my land with my knowledge and permission. Any question about her presence comes to me. From the house window came a small thump. Lena, failing to remain hidden. Pell tapped the pen against the folio. You understand that taking responsibility for a non-settlement orc within the border measure makes you liable for damages, disputes, movement violations, and undeclared trade. Yes, Mira said. Davin. He kept his eyes on Pell. Write it. Pell did slowly. Men like him disliked writing words they had not chosen. When he finished, he asked to inspect the barn, the stores, and the sleeping arrangements. Davin allowed the first two and refused the third. Pell said refusal would be noted. Davin said he had already shown a talent for notes. Mira made a sound suspiciously close to a cough. Pell left before supper with mud on his boots and less satisfaction than he had hoped to carry away. Davin watched him ride toward the road. Only when the official disappeared behind the rise did he release the gate. That was foolish, Mira said behind him. Yes. You did not ask what it would cost. No. You should have. He turned. She stood in the yard with wood dust on her sleeve, jaw set, eyes bright with something that was not anger, though it wore anger's coat. Lena hovered in the open doorway, despite being told to stay warm. Davin said, Would you have told me? Mira's mouth closed. There, he said. We are both badly built. Lena whispered, I like our house. Mira looked at the child. The hard line of her shoulders eased by a fraction. So do I. It was the first time she had said it. Not the house is useful, not the roof holds. I like our house. Davin felt the words settle somewhere under his ribs with a weight that made movement difficult. So he moved. He picked up the axe, set a log on the block, and split it cleanly in one stroke. Lena shook her head at Mira, solemn with expertise. He will do that for a while. I see, Mira said. He did it after I told him I knew where Mama's blue cup was. Davin set another log down. Both of you have work. Yes, Papa. Yes, Davin. The way Mira said his name had changed. Or perhaps it had always been like that, and he had been too busy refusing to hear it. The official's visit left traces. Mira checked the road before dawn for several days, and Davin hated that she felt the need. In town he filed the notice, paid the fee meant for a plough blade, and wrote farm labour under purpose. When the clerk asked duration, Davin held the pen long enough for the man to look annoyed. Then he wrote indefinite. On the road home, he bought lamp oil, boot nails, and pear seeds. Sora had liked pears, especially the hard yellow ones from Miller's orchard, and though pears were stubborn on that rise, Davin bought them anyway. He handed Mira the folded notice without ceremony. She read the word indefinite and said nothing. Lena abandoned a worm relocation project to inspect the silence. What does it say? She asked. That your father makes expensive choices. Mira said. Is that bad? Not always. Davin held up the packet of seeds. Pears are stubborn. Mira looked from the seeds to him. Then they will fit. They planted them by the south wall where the stone held sun. 3 people kneeling in mud over something that might never grow. Later, Mira's bedroll moved from the alcove to the loft space near Lena's room because, Lena argued, big breathing scared bad dreams. Davin objected on structural grounds. No one asked what those were. He built a better rail the next day. Mira's pack began appearing in the corner beside the hearth instead of beneath the alcove bed. First because the ladder made carrying it awkward, then because the corner was dry, then because no reason was offered and none requested. One evening Davin came in from repairing the lower path and found Lena asleep at the table, cheek on her slate, orc letters under her hand. Mira stirred stew at the hearth. She wanted to ask whether a debt can become a home. Mira said. Davin hung his coat on the peg she had carved. What did you say? I told her to ask you. That was unkind. Yes. He looked at the sleeping child. I don't know. Mira added salt to the pot. Many true answers are not useful at first. They ate after he carried Lena upstairs. Across the table, with the lamp low and the house smelling of rain and onions, he told Mira what he had not meant to tell anyone. That after Sora died, every kindness had felt like something preparing to leave. so he had stopped making room for it. Mira listened without softening the truth by pitying him. "And now?" she asked. "Now you keep doing things before I can refuse." "Yes." "It is irritating." "Yes." He looked at his hands flat on the table. "It is also not unwelcome." Mira rubbed the crescent scar on one knuckle. "In my custom, if a debt cannot be named by the owed, the owing may offer service until dismissed. I don't dismiss you. No. I don't name a price. No? Then maybe some doors don't need closing." At the top of the stairs, one floorboard creaked. Davin closed his eyes. Lena whispered that she had not been listening, then asked whether Mira still had to sleep in the alcove if the door stayed open. Davin said tomorrow. Lena said that was not an answer. Mira traitorously almost smiled. The pear seeds sprouted 3 green hooks by the south wall. Lena named them all Sora, then looked frightened. Davin crouched beside the bed and said her mother would have called that confusing for the pears. Mira named the smallest one Sora who leans left, and Lena laughed so hard she startled a hen off the wall. Davin looked at Mira over the tiny leaves and thought, with a clarity so ordinary it startled him, that he wanted her to see them fruit. The debt returned at the end of spring. Mira raised it on a morning bright with new grass and wet earth, when the lower field had been turned, the coop reinforced, the roof mended, the mare sound Lena recovered, and the official notice folded in the chest beneath the winter blankets. Davin was sharpening the scythe outside the barn. Lena was in the loft pretending to tidy and actually reading the orc marks Mira had written for her. Mira came from the house with her pack in one hand, not on her back, in her hand. Davin kept the stone moving along the blade. Once. Twice. The sound was thin and clean. "The southern caravan leaves Miller's Crossing in 3 days," Mira said. He set the stone down because his hand had gone too still for the work to remain safe. "Does it? They need a pathfinder. Most caravans do. I know the road. You know many roads." "Yes." The pack hung at her side. It looked wrong there, like a shutter unlatched before a storm. Davin wiped the blade with a cloth. "Are you telling me you're going?" "I am telling you I could." The difference mattered. It mattered so much he disliked it. He looked at the yard because her face was too direct. The path to the coop had dried in ridges from Lena's boots. The carved cloak peg beside the door held Mira's cloak. Smoke lifted from the chimney in a straight line. He had not noticed until that moment that the farm, which had once seemed arranged around absence, now looked arranged around return. "The debt," Mira said. "The fence holds, the chimney draws, the child is well, the fox lives elsewhere, the boots fit, the official has his paper. I have worked through winter and spring." "You have. If balance can be made by work, it is made." He folded the cloth slowly. "And if it can't?" Mira's grip tightened on the pack strap. "Then you must say." There it was, the price she had been waiting for, the dismissal she feared and requested because fear did not excuse disorder. Davin thought of every answer that would be too large. "Stay because Lena needs you. Stay because I sleep when you are under this roof. Stay because the table looks wrong when your chair is empty. Stay because I have spent 2 years mistaking silence for strength, and you are the first person stubborn enough to make noise by saying almost nothing. None of those were speakable. Some were not fair. Most were not enough." He stood. The scythe blade caught sun between them. "I filed indefinite," he said. Mira's eyes moved over his face. "It is a poor word," he continued. "Clark's word. But it means I did not put an end date where a man could point to it." "No. And the pear frame needs widening before summer." "It does. And Lena's last questions are worse when you are not here to answer half of them incorrectly." "I answer accurately." "That is often worse." Her mouth almost moved. Davin set the scythe against the barn wall and faced her with empty hands. Empty hands were harder. I don't know what settles a debt that stopped being one without asking me. Mira's breathing changed. Once. He looked at the pack. But if you are asking where it belongs, it doesn't belong by the door. The words entered the yard and stayed there. They were not a declaration. They were a board set into place, a peg driven true, a thing that could hold weight if both people let it. Mira looked down at the pack as if she had forgotten she carried it. For the first time since Davin had known her, uncertainty showed plainly in her hands. Not weakness. Choice. She crossed the yard past him, close enough that he caught the scent of smoke, leather, and crushed thyme, and went into the house. From the loft came a thud, a whisper, and Lena's urgent attempt to sound as if she had not been listening through the floor. Davin remained by the barn. He picked up the sharpening stone, set it down, picked it up again. The blade did not need more work. He sharpened it anyway until Mira returned to the doorway without the pack. "Where is Lena?" she asked, failing at secrecy. "I heard. She gets that from her mother. Not from you. I am excellent at secrecy." Mira looked at the scythe, then at the blade already honed bright enough to shave bark. "Yes, I see." He let the stone rest in his palm. Their eyes met. There were things still unsaid, but for once the silence did not feel like a wall. It felt like ground not yet planted. That night, supper was lentils with smoked onion and the last dried mushrooms from Mira's pack. Lena ate 2 bowls and asked whether caravans had good food. Mira said no. Lena asked whether pathfinders got lonely. Mira said sometimes. Lena asked whether lonely was worse on roads or in houses. Davin told her that was 3 last questions, and she had spent them early. Lena said this was not night yet, so they did not count. Mira traitorously agreed the rule was unclear. At bedtime, Lena stood on the second step, hair braided badly because she had done it herself, and looked down at them with the satisfaction of a child who knew adults were finally approaching a conclusion she had reached months earlier. "Last question," she said. Davin leaned back in his chair. "Choose carefully." She looked at Mira. "Do orcs have a word for when a stray is not a stray anymore?" Mira sat by the hearth, mending the torn strap of her pack. The pack lay open beside her, not ready for travel, simply being repaired because useful things deserved care. She pulled the needle through leather, considered, and said, "Varesh." Lena tested it. "Varesh. It means one who found the path by being found." Davin looked at Mira. "That is too many meanings. Then use it carefully." Lena smiled. "Good night." "Good night," Davin said. "Sleep without crowded dreams," Mira added. The child went upstairs. Her door closed with unusual care. Davin suspected an ear remained near the crack, but chose mercy, or cowardice, or whatever name fit a man learning the difference. Mira continued mending the strap. Davin watched her hands, the same hands that had set snares without cruelty, stitched boots, carried his feverish daughter, washed a blue cup, and placed it in sunlight. He wanted to touch the crescent scar on her knuckle. He did not. Wanting did not require taking. That was a lesson some men never learned, and some learned late enough to be ashamed. "You made that word up," he said. "No." He waited. A little. There it was again. The small shift of her mouth. He found himself smiling before he could decide against it. Outside, spring rain began, light on the roof, patient in the dark. It would find every weak place by morning. Rain always did. Davin made a note to check the barn gutter, then let the note go. Not every future task needed to be held at once. Mira tied off the strap and tested it with both hands. "Strong enough." "For roads?" "For carrying." He nodded. "Different things." "Sometimes." The fire settled. The house breathed around them. Stone, timber, ash, wool, drying herbs, child asleep above, tools hung in their places, boots by the hearth, a cloak on its carved peg. Davin stood to bar the door for the night. The motion was familiar. Slide iron, check latch, palm against wood. For years the bar had meant keeping the world out. That evening, with Mira behind him and rain stitching the dark, it meant something else. Not safety exactly. Safety was too proud a word for any border house. It meant chosen weather, chosen risk, the kind a man could let in and build around. When he turned back, Mira was looking at the corner beside the hearth. Her pack sat there, not at the door, waiting to be lifted at first light, not hidden beneath a bed, ready for leaving without witness. In the corner, where useful things were kept when they belonged to the life of the house, the mending basket, the spare lantern, Lena's wooden horse with its crooked scarf when she forgot to take it upstairs. Mira had placed the pack upright, strap repaired, buckles closed, travel ready because she would always know roads, but settled into the corner as if the house had made a shape for it, and the pack, stubborn thing, had finally admitted the fit. Davin said nothing. Mira said nothing. Above them, one floorboard creaked once and went still. In the morning, rain cleared before sunrise. The world smelled of wet soil and clean smoke. Davin woke to the sound of movement in the kitchen, Mira grinding herbs, Lena whispering too loudly that she could crack eggs without shells if trusted, the kettle beginning its low complaint over the fire. He lay still for one breath, then another, not because stillness had become easy, but because for once his thoughts had somewhere to rest. When he came downstairs, Lena was standing on a stool with flour on her cheek, and Mira was correcting her grip on a bowl. "Papa," Lena said. "Mira says caravans eat terrible breakfast. Most people do when they lack supervision." Mira looked over her shoulder. "Your breakfast was once boiled carrots. And now I am supervised." Lena beamed, as if this settled the entire future. Davin crossed to the door and opened it. Morning light entered clean and gold. The pear bed by the south wall glistened. The barn roof held. The road beyond the yard bent toward town in one direction and toward the old Orc roots in the other, both washed bright by rain, both waiting. He could see them clearly from where he stood. For the first time in years, neither looked like an accusation. Behind him, Mira said, "Do not let the heat out." He closed the door. The pack remained in the corner.